In this lesson, we'll talk about input axes and input columns. After we constructed our grid line in the previous lesson, today we can input our axes referring to this grid lines. Let me construct a simple grid line using Cartesian grid line. I'm putting any numbers just to see how we can use the grid lines to input the axes. Here we have a figure of grid lines. Let us remember that to hide or to show the axis toolbar is this icon. We have axis input, removing axes, and renaming axes. We'll start with axis input. The name of the first axis is A1. It's not necessary to use this name. We can change to any name. Let's try first of all this naming. We can see A11, axis A11 is constructed. Then the sequence will be automatically changed to A2, then A3 until the end. We can change the sequence to A. Let me do the perpendicular axis. So we will have A, then B and C until the end. Any sequence we can enter it in this box, and then Robot CBS will automatically change the naming. Okay, let's go to removing axes. Let's say, for example, I don't need this and this. So just clicking on the circle, then it will be removed. If we clicked on the middle, on the grid, anything, nothing will happen, except if we clicked on the circle, then the axis will be removed. Again, we are having here renaming. To change the name of a certain axis, let's say I want to name this axis K1. I will write K1 here, then I'll click on the circle. So K1 axis is constructed. By the way, we can input axis inclined in any direction. Let's remove all the axes together by using group cursor. So I can remove them at the same moment. Again, let me construct simple sequence of axes. and in the perpendicular direction. But let me change the name. One and two. Let's say 3 is here, then 4, and 5. Assuming that this is our axis, it's just an assumption. Now I will introduce columns toolbar. If we remember that we fix it here at the top left, columns toolbar. What we have in the columns toolbar, at the left we have columns input, then table columns input, columns rotation, also columns rotation. The difference between this and this, we will see it later on. One is by cursor, one is by rotation. Then removing columns, columns material, columns section, fixing columns, rectangular and circular column. Again, we'll fix it on the right place. We will start with column input. Robot will show a form expressing the dimensions of the column, B, which is the width, and H, the depth of the column. Let's say column width is 20 centimeters and the height or the depth is 40. How to input the column? Easily by group cursor or by single cursor. If we used single cursor, we will click on the grid, if we use group cursor, we will select using window all the grid lines, then easily we can construct these columns. Let me put my columns at the middle here and here, two columns here, also here and here. We can also make a polar grid starting from zero, zero, but first of all we will learn how to change our axes. Moving coordinate system. This one is the center of the coordinate system, 0, 0. Now if I move it to here, then the coordinate system will start from here. So this point is the 0, 0. Let me move it to here. Sorry. So now this point is the center. Again, I'll go to polar and I will construct polar grid lines in this direction. Okay, so now we will not change the center of the polar system because already we changed the coordinate center, the center of the coordinate, but we will do this polar grid line starting from -90 to 90 with 15 of 12 numbers and 2 meters of 3 numbers. Maybe we did one mistake. Let's check again. This is wrong. This should be 0. Okay, so this is the grid line, polar grid line. I will delete this column using removing by cursor. So I clicked on removing columns and then by cursor, so this column is removed and this column is removed. How to do a sequence of columns along this grid? So first of all, if we said that we want to input by cursor, group cursor, then we clicked on input column, then we selected like that. We can see that several columns will be near each other, so it's not good to do this option. It's better to make input by cursor to choose the position of the column exactly. Let's say also one column here. So here we did one mistake also. 2 columns are above each other. Again, I remove this column. Finally, the last column, let's assume it will be here. So by this way we can input columns by cursor or by groups, removing also by cursor or by group. Now we will do rotation for the upper columns. Let's say this we want to rotate it by this option. We'll do rotation by cursor, so I'll click on the column I want to rotate it, then on the perpendicular grid, so it will be rotated by 90 degrees. Again, let's do for this. I'll click on the center, then to the perpendicular grid line, 90 degrees. Assuming I want to rotate this column perpendicular grid, so 90 degrees. This column maybe 45 degrees or certain amount. Let's say I'm rotating this, so this exactly 45 degrees. Again, if I want to rotate by angle, I will enter the angle here, let's say 30, and I will click on the we should choose single cursor, so 30 degrees. This column is rotated 30 degrees. Also this column, just by clicking. So removing columns, we talked about it. Also rotation, in the two options we talked about it. We shall not forget that in these two options we can use single or group of cursor. Now column material, actually the default material is concrete. We can use several materials, and we will learn later on how to enter different materials, but now let's stay on choosing concrete, 0 concrete. Column section. Now all the columns are adjusted to 20 by 40, but also I can change. If I want to change certain column, so I'll go to column section, then choose the dimension, new dimension, and only by clicking, the new dimension is 40 by 60. So if we go zoom, to this column, so the dimensions are 40 by 60, and this 0 is an indication of the material. The material is 0 concrete, as we said here, 0 concrete. So column is 40, 60 and 0 concrete. Again, back to the previous zoom. Finally, we shall talk about this numbering. So each column having 1 slash or dash, 10 or 6 or 7, different. 1, the first number, which is first digit, which is 1, indicates that we are on the first floor. So 1 for all the columns. Then dash, it's the numbering of the column, depends on the sequence of numbering. So the first column will take 1 dash 1, then 1 2 1 3 1 4. The last column will have the last number, and under it we'll have the section size and the material. Now we said how to change the section of a column. Also we have here fixing columns. We can fix the columns in the B dimension or the H dimension. This we will talk about it later, but just we shall explain that the column dimension can be fixed in both dimensions or in both directions, and in one or no direction shall be fixed. Only this shall be used to optimize the solutions and to optimize the calculation. Finally, we'll talk about it later, and we'll talk now about the rectangular and circular. Whenever this toolbar is used, so we are drawing rectangular. Here, if we change to this, all the columns will be circular. So now circular column, if we go to input, the new form is only showing diameter. Same comments will be applied to the circular column. We reached the end of this lesson. We learned axes, about the axes, and about the columns, how to input columns, to remove, to rotate, to rename, and axes, how to make renaming for axes, to input axes, to change the position of axes. In the coming lesson we'll learn more about beams and shear walls.